Hello, it's Pastor Jack Cummings with Doorway of Hope in Hamlin, West Virginia. Thank you for joining me for the book of Revelation, Why I Quit Believing in the Rapture, Part 12. We welcome all of you, and I would especially like to thank our subscribers. It really is a blessing to know that people are getting blessed by these teachings. I really enjoy hearing from you guys, and I'm glad that God is using us to minister to you, which that's all we ever wanted on this side of the camera. And as we learned the truth, we felt compelled to share it. So thank you for making that possible. It really is a privilege and an honor to be invited into your lives to share these truths. We've also picked up several subscribers over the last teaching, and I want to welcome you and thank you so much for subscribing. And God has certainly blessed this channel, and we thank Him for it. If you're new here, I was raised believing in a rapture of the church, coming one world government under a ruler known as the Antichrist, and the coming mark of the beast during a coming 7-year tribulation period. This is known as futurism and was invented by a fellow by the name of a Jesuit priest by the name of Francisco de Ribera in 1585 as a result of the Counter-Reformation, which was a response to the Protestant Reformation when the church broke free from the shackles of the Antichrist, also known as the papacy of the Roman Catholic Church. And Ribera relied heavily on the misinterpretation of the Olivet Discourse, the 70 Weeks of Daniel, and the Book of Revelation for his Doctrine of Devils. This channel adheres to the historicist view of these passages, which were adhered to by great men of God like Martin Luther, John Calvin, John Knox, E.B. Elliott, Isaac Newton, Adam Clarke, Matthew Henry, and Charles Spurgeon, just to name a few. And we're just getting started on the judgments on the spiritual Roman Empire, also known as the Roman Catholic Church and its head, the Pope. In Revelation 5, we see a scroll in the right hand of God, which was written on front and back. The front dealt with the pagan Roman Empire and the judgments upon it. You got the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, while the back of the scroll deals with the spiritual Roman Empire. Chapter 12 in Revelation is the beginning of the back of the scroll, and as an introduction, God takes us behind the natural realm to recap what we saw on the front of the scroll. Only He's showing us who the real players are in the spirit realm. The introduction was covered in our last 2 lessons, parts 10 and 11. And you can see on your screen the timeline from Revelation 12. This timeline covers from 12:1 to 12:14, and to bring us up to speed, the rest of the timeline would go like this. So there, we covered this timeline here last time. To bring us up to speed, the rest of the timeline would go like this. In 408, let's just go ahead and talk about that. The timeline before. In 140 BC, Judah emerged as an independent state. In 63 BC, the Romans conquered Judea, ending their independence. In 27 BC, the Roman Republic became the Roman Empire. And in 4 BC, Jesus Christ was born. In 27 AD, Christ began his ministry. In 30 AD, Christ was crucified, buried, resurrected, and ascended to the right hand of God the Father. In 34 AD, the stoning of Stephen, persecution arose, and Philip went to Samaria, ending the 1-week covenant with the Jews. That's the 70th week of Daniel that we see in the book of Daniel when it talks, I think it's Daniel 9. I should have had that wrote down somewhere. When it talks about the 70 weeks, the 70th week was the 3.5 years that Jesus Christ ministered on the earth, and the 3.5 years that the disciples hesitated to go to the Jews, go to the Gentiles, and instead spent their time in Jerusalem and Judea ministering to the Jews. That was the last 70th week of Daniel. So in 70 AD, Jerusalem is made desolate by the Roman army, and the temple was destroyed. In 254 AD, the Pope claimed authority over doctrine, and we saw the woman flee into the wilderness. In 390 AD, the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as the state religion. Now let's go back to timeline 2. In 400 AD, the Ostrogoths invaded the Roman Empire like a flood, and in 425 AD, the Vandals began the invasion of the Mediterranean Sea. So, before I get on with my notes, I want to just say I'm very excited about the teaching, in that I believe, as far as the rapture, the non-rapture doctrine goes, I believe we have 4 more teachings. We have this one and another one, which tonight we're going to cover the first beast in Revelation 13. And the next teaching will cover the second beast in Revelation 13. Then I believe we'll be able to cover the vials in one teaching. Then we will cover some scriptures that are, as Speed Wilson said, rapture disproving scriptures. Scriptures that prove that there is no rapture. And once we cover them, I believe we'll be done with our teaching. Now, I think we can wrap that up in 4 parts. It may be 5 parts, but we're hoping to get it down in 4. So I'm excited about that. So in the Revelation timeline there, when we included the Vandals, I wanted to include the Vandals as they are part of the timeline, but especially because in verse 12:12 we were told, by a great voice, woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you having great wrath. And if you haven't watched the last teaching, part 11, please do so, because this is just kind of a quick overview of what we covered last time. So there we have the invaders of the land and the sea, the Ostrogoths and the Vandals. It took the Ostrogoths 10 years to complete their mission, and the Vandals took 45. The Vandals had to do theirs by boat, so it took a little longer. Okay, so now on to Plan D. That's what we talked about last time. Plan D, or if you can't beat them, join them, and then beat them, which we'll be talking about the rise of the Antichrist in this teaching. So now we are on the devil's Plan D, the rise of the Antichrist. It actually would not be Plan D. It would be more like Plan quadruple Z or something like that. But in our study last time, we covered how he used the Roman Empire to kill. He had wanted to use the Roman Empire to kill the Messiah at birth from Revelation 12:4. He failed. He tried to kill the Christian faith through the Roman Empire. He failed. He tried to use the invading hordes to destroy the Christians in the Roman Empire, and they converted to Christianity, so fail. So now we have something different. So tonight we're looking at something different. I would also like to add that we are now quickly coming, I discovered that, near the end of these teachings. So once we get through the book of Revelation, we'll do a conclusion in Scripture. And we're not there yet, but I can start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, so that's good. Anyway, on to Plan D, or as we know it, Revelation 13. As we approach chapter 13, we should remember that this is going to be a transition, and that the devil is going to change his, I don't want to say strategy, because it's always, his strategy is always the same, and that is to destroy anything that's good, namely the people and the influence of God, but he's going to transition his mode of attack. So that's what we're looking at. So in Revelation 13:1, it says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." Okay, I think you'll enjoy this. There are a couple of things that this does right off the bat. The first thing is it puts us in remembrance of the beast of Daniel 7, which rose out of the sea. And there are 2 ways that I've found to interpret this sea. Many times, as we discussed last time when the Bible talks about the sea, it is talking about a mass of people, which there certainly was a mass of people. But I've found that in Daniel's vision, and here again in Revelation 13, that this sea could also mean the Mediterranean Sea, as all of these kingdoms, these 4 beasts that Daniel saw, were around the sea. And we have some teachings on this channel about the book of Daniel if you're so interested in doing a deeper dive than what we're doing here tonight. Anyway, we could get deeper into the weeds on this, but we'll try to stay on the green a little bit, okay? So Daniel said in Daniel 7:2, he said, Daniel spoke and said, "I saw in my vision by night And behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. Okay, so in Revelation 13, we see. Let's see here. Now we're still covering Daniel 7. Okay, it says the first was like a lion. This is Daniel 7:4. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and there's a reason that we're covering this, and you'll see that as we go on. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. That first beast that Daniel saw in Daniel 7 was the Babylonian Empire. Okay, so we know that. And so then in Daniel 7:5, it says, and behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise and devour much flesh. This bear represents the Medo-Persian Empire. The Medes and the Persians joined forces. We've talked about this before, but we're going somewhere with this. So the more accurate name than the Medes or the Persians or the Medes and the Persians would be the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay, but I had some space restraints there on my slide. So, but anyway, I've seen it called both. I've seen it called the Medes, the Persians, and the Medo-Persians. So then the next beast that Daniel saw, he says, and after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. That was the Greek Empire. Okay, so then the fourth beast that Daniel saw, he says, and after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So there again, it talks about the 10 horns. Now Daniel calls this thing a beast, and so does Revelation 13:1. I saw a beast rise up out of the sea. So we have a beast in Daniel, and really Daniel tells us very little about it, other than it was quite frightening, and it had iron teeth, and you know, I think iron's mentioned a couple of times, but anyway, it had iron teeth, and it was just like the statue that we've talked about before in Daniel 2. The Romans were associated with iron, and you know, those of you that are familiar with history, whenever they talk about the Romans, they talk about the Iron Age. The Greeks, they talk about the Bronze Age, but with the Romans, they always talk about the Iron Age, and it's interesting that God uses iron every time he talks about that fourth beast. It had iron teeth, and it destroyed things under its feet. It was different from the rest, but he did not even call it a dragon or a goat or anything. He just said that it was a beast, and it had 10 horns. Now, the reason that I wanted to go over these different beasts is because in our next verse in Revelation about the beast, he says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon, remember the dragon from Revelation 12, gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Okay, this is simple enough. If you look at maps of those empires, the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, and the Greeks, at the height of their power, you will see that the Roman Empire crossed all those lines. Some of their territory had at one time been controlled by Babylon. Some of their territory had at one time been controlled by the Greeks. Some of their territory at one time had been controlled by the Persians. Okay, so and I was actually going to show you the maps, but I did not think that the payout was worth all the effort going into it. Just you can, you know, it's not hard to imagine that some of the land that the Babylonians controlled, the Romans wound up with. Some of the land that the Persians controlled, the Romans wound up with. Some of the land that the Greeks controlled, the Romans wound up with. Charles Jennings, in his book, the Book of Revelation, End Time Prophecies from the Israelite and Historicist Interpretation, points out that the Roman Empire adopted their political and economic system from Babylon, their approach to humanistic law from the Medo-Persians and their desire for intellect and cultural development from the Greeks, which I'm going to say you could make a real good argument for that case as well. Now, we discovered over the last two lessons how the devil was the power behind the Roman Empire in the spiritual realm. And now we see another witness that the dragon, the enemy of your soul, the devil, gave the Roman Empire their power, their place, and their authority, which of course was granted by the Father. All things are tools in his hands. We've talked about that. That God allowed the Romans to rise up and do these things. So, anyway, by the power of the devil. So, in Revelation 13:3, it says, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast." Now, remember, this beast has 7 heads. Again, this is transitional, and I hope that I can do a good job of explaining this. We're going from one beast to another in this chapter, in chapter 13. And again, tonight we're going to be looking at this beast that rose up out of the sea. But we get our understanding from Revelation 17, where we see a great whore, the mother of harlots, riding a beast. You can see it there in the white part there. So it says, "So he carried me away." This is in Revelation 17. So this is 4 chapters farther into Revelation. But again, this is where we get our understanding of who this beast is. "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." Sounds awful familiar. In 17:9, it says, "And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, and there are 7 kings." So the 7 heads can be the 7 mountains. It can also represent the 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Okay? So, this was prophetic to John when he was standing there in 96 AD looking forward. And when we see the head killed, it's later on in time. So it can mean seven mountains, which is Rome. Anytime you hear about the city with 7 mountains, it's talking about Rome, but also means 7 kings or 7 different types of rulers. And we studied this when we looked at the 7 forms of Roman government. So before, that was the 7 crowns, and I believe that is the slide that we used to look at the 7 crowns. The 7 crowns represented 7 different types of government from 753 BC to 509 BC. It was kings. Kings ruled the Roman kingdom at that time. Then it became a republic in 509 BC. And from 509 BC to 27 BC, you had consuls. You also, during that time, had dictators, which was used for emergency power. You had decemvirs from 451 to 449. That didn't last very long. You had military tribunals, which lasted from 471 to 27 BC. In 27 BC, the Roman Republic became an empire, and that's what we refer to as Imperial Rome, and it was ruled then by emperors. That lasted from 27 BC to 476 AD, and it was interrupted for a short time when they had the Tetrarchy, which was 4 different emperors ruling at the same time. That didn't last very long. Looks like 31 years. 31 years they had that. So it didn't last very long. Then he went back to just having the emperors. So as I was doing this study, I ran across one brother that mentioned the Caesars in his list of 7 different people. A Caesar was actually a consul. Okay, so it's mentioned right there on the list. If you're looking at it going, where's the Caesars? The Caesars was a consul. Julius Caesar, the very last Caesar, was a consul. So if you look at this list and wonder where the Caesars are, they're right there with the consuls. Now, when John wrote this, I believe in 96 AD, the empire was under emperors. John was told in Revelation 17:10, there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. This is the first 5 on the list. And one is, these are the emperors, and the other is not yet come, which was a tetrarchy, the four rulers, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. How long did the tetrarchy last? We just covered this, but I didn't realize I had it in my notes. 31 years, and I would say that that's a short space. Now, I want you to look at the emperors. Rome was under emperors until 476 AD. Then what happened? Well, in our Revelation 13 timeline, in 476 AD, Romulus Augustulus was a child emperor. I believe he was 10 or 11 years old. And the last emperor, he was the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire. And he was deposed, which means he was asked to leave. And he did. Odoacer, who was the king of the Heruli, he invaded the Roman Empire. He invaded Rome on September 4th, 476 AD. And when he got in there, he just looked at the emperor, who was 10 or 11 years old. He didn't want to kill him. So he just said, you need to get out. And he said, I'm out of here. So that was the end of that. That was the fall of the Roman Empire in the West. That's how it fell. And however, even though he got up and he left, he did receive a retirement. Odoacer took care of him. So now this doesn't mean anything to you guys, but that happened on September 4th, 476 AD. And 1,438 years later, Millard Cummings was born, and that was my daddy. So that's an easy way for me to remember what day the fall of the Roman Empire took place, because it happened the same day that my dad was born. Only, 1,438 years later. So now, for all practical purposes, and when speaking to historians, this was the fall of the Roman Empire. If you've been watching these teachings, you know that the Eastern Roman Empire continued after the Roman Empire fell. After Rome fell, the western part fell. The Eastern Roman Empire continued with its capital in Constantinople, and we call that the Byzantine Empire. So, which we've talked about several times. So, where does that put us? The last head was wounded to death. Monkey died, show's over, right? So that's the end of that. But what does it say? What does our verses say there? The seventh head was killed, and then what happened? It says, and I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death. That was the fall of the Roman Empire. And his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. So that's all our scriptures we're going to look at. But it says the deadly wound was healed. Okay. I'd like to add another group of verses into the mix as well, which fits our timeline and our scriptures, and I'm sure you're familiar with. In 2 Thessalonians 2:3, it says, Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first. And that was 250 AD. We'll talk about that in a minute. And that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God. The temple of God is the church. Don't let anybody tell you there's a third temple coming, because we are the third temple. God does not dwell in temples made with hands. He's not waiting to build another temple. We are the temple of God. So the son of perdition is going to sit in the temple of God, showing that he is God. And remember ye not that when I was with you, I told you these things. And now ye know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. And then shall the wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. That happens in Revelation 19, 20, and 21. Can't wait to get there. Can you? Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders. Now, I ended these verses with a comma, which I don't like to do, but the rest of the scriptures do not change the meaning of what I'm showing you. I want to point out, you can finish them yourself if you question, and I invite you to study these things yourself. Anyway, let's take a look. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. We're gonna go over these verses again. Let no man deceive you by any means. Now, it's interesting that rapture people say that the apostles believed the Lord would return any minute. Even in their lifetime, the rapture could take place any minute. The disciples, they say the disciples was teaching that and preaching that. And in this epistle, Paul is saying that there was going to be a great apostasy in the church before the day of the Lord. So he was saying you don't have to worry about that happening yet because there's some other things that's got to take place. So that kind of changes what I've been raised to believe all my life. I don't know why I'm so blurry, but that keeps doing that. I need to look at that sometime when I'm not filming. But anyway, so when Paul was talking about the day of the Lord, he was talking about the day of judgment, not the rapture, okay? And I think Paul knew that this would take generations. And let's go on and see what he says. For that day shall not come. Again, this was the day of judgment. The Thessalonians were being told that the day of judgment was at hand. You can study it out. That's what they were told. But Paul tells them that that day shall not come. The day of judgment shall not come, except there come a falling away first. That falling away happened in 250 AD under the Decian persecution. I have a teaching about that on this channel. It was this persecution that caused Pope Stephen to write the Edict of Stephen in 254 AD, claiming that he, the Pope, had all authority over doctrine. And what had happened is Decian said that you had to worship to a pagan god, and everybody that worshiped to a pagan god, he passed a law saying you had to worship to a pagan god, and you had to have a magistrate sign a paper saying that you had worshiped to a pagan god. So a bunch of people left the church because, they said, because people that was worshiping the Lord was being thrown into prison, they were being slain, they were being killed. All these different things took place. So there was a lot of people that left the church because they did not want to lose their lives or be thrown in prison or lose their property and all this stuff. And so after the guy Decian only lived for 18 months. And so then after Decian died, who cares about what he had to say about worshiping the pagan gods? So that fell by the wayside pretty quick. Okay. So, then, after that law went away, people wanted to come back to the church, and there was different churches that said, we're not taking you back. You turned your back on the Lord, we're leaving you that way. I don't care if you are wanting to repent, doesn't matter to me. So Pope Stephen rose up, and people asked him to, other popes, other bishops, said, would you rise up and tell people you got authority so we can settle this thing and quit fighting over this? So he rose up and said, let them in. I'm the head of the church. He said, I've got authority over all doctrine, so I'm going to tell you, you need to let this guy in. That was, again, the falling away took place in 250 AD. The son of perdition was revealed in 254 AD. The Pope rose up and said, I've got authority over all doctrine. That's handy. So, that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God. That's the church. We're the temple of God. Stop waiting on another third temple. We're it. And the Pope sat down in the church and claimed to be the head of it. Okay? Of course, the head of all the church is Jesus Christ himself. So he said, I'm the guy. Showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was with you, this is Paul writing, when I was with you, I told you these things. Now, you may want to remember, this was a letter, okay? If Paul had written plainly, if he wrote in there and said, after the fall of the Roman Empire, the Antichrist would come into power, probably a bad day for anybody that was found carrying that letter. And he had told him in private that the Roman Empire was going to fall, what was going to take place. And so now he's saying, don't you remember when I was with you? I told you these things. I'm not going to tell you in this letter because Bill Bob is going to be carrying this letter and I don't want him to be killed over it. So he's reminding him, remember what I told you when I was with you. And now this is 2:6, and now ye know what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he is taken out of the way. That word letteth means to restrain. He that is restraining the son of perdition will remain so until he's taken out of the way. We talked last time about the 3 timelines of the power of the Pope. He was revealed in the first one, 254 AD, but really had very little power. It was all proclaimed. I've got power over all authority. For one thing, he did not come into full power while the emperor of Rome was still in the way. The Roman Empire kept him in check. But after the fall of the Roman Empire, and as a matter of fact, and again, we're talking about a transition from one beast, the Roman Empire, to the second beast, the Roman Catholic Church. In 538 AD, 62 years after the fall of the Roman Empire, Emperor Justinian, which he was not in the West, he was in the East, the Eastern Roman Emperor, the Byzantine guy in Constantinople, decreed that everyone was subject to the Bishop of Rome. That's the Pope, and it was enforced by arms, like he was an emperor or something. Okay, we get that? He was treated like an emperor. This Pope guy was. Okay, so 2 Thessalonians 2:8 says, And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. We're still waiting on this part. This verse is also known as Revelation 19, 20, and 21. And the way that reads, it says, And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet, that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire, burning with brimstone. All right. Revelation 19:21 says, And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceedeth out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. 2 Thessalonians 2:9 puts it this way, Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. Stay on course. Oh, okay, that's a note for me. I'm going to talk about the saints here in a minute, okay? But it says that with after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. So I have to rein myself in here because I want to wait to talk about the great lying wonders when we get to Revelation 13:13. Okay, and I don't think we get there tonight. So, but anyway, we will talk about the lying wonders later. If you hear about a statue of Mary bleeding, or you hear about a statue of Jesus Christ bleeding or crying, or something along those lines, that's a great lying wonder. That does not happen. And you've heard all this kind of stuff all through my lifetime. It's all hoax. But my favorite lying wonders is the saints. That they would name saints. They would say, this guy's a saint or this girl's a saint. And what these people would do, they would have done some great thing. And that is absolutely impossible. And so the popes would say, they did that, let's make them a saint. My favorite one, and I wasn't really prepared to do this tonight, but I touched on it, and I don't think I get to it in this teaching. There is a saint, and I can't remember her name, that she, for 14 years, according to the Pope, for 14 years, she lived on communion. She ate a communion wafer and drank a little thing of juice every day, and that sustained her for 14 years. And so they called that a miracle and made her a pope, and or made her a saint, I'm sorry. And I think that's hooey, because you don't see anybody in Scripture doing that at all. Jesus fasted for 40 days, and they say after 40 days you go into starvation mode. Elijah, when he was going to go into the wilderness, if God does these kind of things where you can just live for 14 years without really eating anything, he would have surely done it for Elijah. But instead, he had the ravens feed Elijah. So, I don't know. It just seems a little hinky to me to think that some girl went for 14 years living on wafers and grapefruit juice. But anyway, that's just an example. I will, before these teachings are over, find her name, not tonight, but before these teachings are over, I'll find her name, and we'll look at these people a little deeper. It's probably going to be in the, actually, if it's 13, it'll be in the next lesson. I'm working on those notes now. So, okay, so Revelation 13:3b says, so the deadly wound was healed. Now the empire, the emperor was, he was deposed. He was told to get out, so he left. The deadly wound, the empire, the fall of the Roman Empire took place. It was done. But it says that the deadly wound was healed. The empire is not dead, and the emperor is not replaced. We shall put the Pope back in his place and treat him as the emperor. Deadly wound healed. Okay? When the Pope rose up and took the place of the Emperor of Rome, the deadly wound was healed, and he acted just like the emperor. So, pretty good trick. And all the world wondered after the beast. I would say that they did. The thing will not die, no matter what you do to it. And 13:4, it says, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. Okay, here we go now. All right. Remember how the 12th chapter ended. All right, let's take a look at that. The 12th chapter ended this way. And the dragon was wrought with the woman, and he went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keepeth the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. He went off to find another plan, another way. Let's come up with some new scheme. Let's come up with some new thing. Now here we are, 4 verses later, and it says, let's see here, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? There's a word that jumps off this page at me like a bullet. And when I was a futurist, I missed this word all the time. I was taught about the coming Antichrist. I was taught about the coming political system, the coming one world kingdom, all of that stuff. And there is a word that jumps out. When you get to this part of Revelation, there is a word that jumps out and jumps out and jumps out. And when I was a futurist, I missed it and I missed it and I missed it. And it was like the Matrix, right? These bullets kept flying at me and I kept dodging them. I just wouldn't see it. Okay, now what does it say? In 13:4, it says, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. Worship, okay? You don't find worship mentioned in any of the other beasts that we looked at from Daniel. You don't even see worship mentioned in regards to the first beast until the deadly wound was healed, okay? Why? Because it's a spiritual thing. Worship is a spiritual thing, and this is a spiritual thing. What we're looking at tonight, it's a spiritual thing. Now, once the deadly wound was healed, it's no longer the Roman Empire. It's changing. It's in transition. Now, it's connected with God, okay? Who do you worship? You worship God. The Pope is the vicar of Christ, the substitute of Christ, the Antichrist. Now, worship becomes involved now that the Pope is involved, now that the church, the church is involved, okay? They worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? And like I said, really, the thing won't die. And now in the West, you have God running the thing. The Pope is called the Vicar of Christ. That means he's the substitute of Christ. He says he's got all power in heaven and earth and under the earth. You got God running the thing, okay? The guy professes to be equal with God. So Satan, I believe, had found his end, and now we're on to plan D. We're on plan D now, okay? 13:5 says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. 42 months, what's that timeline? Let's look at the 3 phases of power we talked about last time. This slide's from part 11, where we talked about the 3 phases of power and the different phases God used to different phrases that God used to differentiate them. The 3 phrases was 1,260 days, 40 and 2 months, and a time and times and half, or the dividing of time. Okay, so what is this one now that we're looking at? And let's just go over this slide here. Whenever we see 1,263 days, it is talking about the Pope having doctrinal authority, and all of these timelines equals 1,260 years or days. But you guys should know by now the day for a year principle in prophecy. Okay, and anytime it says 40 and 2 months, that is political authority, and anytime it says a time and times and half a time, that is talking about the persecution of the church by the Roman Empire, by the Roman Catholic Church. By the Roman Catholic Church. So what is this one now? 40 and 2 months. What is that? The Pope has political authority. When did this happen? In 538, with Justinian's decree that everyone had to be subject to the Pope. Now, how does that fit our timeline? We still got our timeline going. How does that fit our timeline? Well, it fits it pretty good. In 476, we saw the fall of the Roman Empire. In 533 A.D., Justinian decreed that everyone was subject to the Pope, and in 538 A.D., the Pope was set into office by military force. Okay, so that's perfect. It fits perfect. Fits right in our timeline. And we have some sprinkles I want to add in there in just a minute, but right now that fits perfect. Wouldn't you say that we're following the book of Revelation, that the book of Revelation is exactly showing us what happened in history? Amen. Now, I want to call out something here in these verses that I waved at when we passed it, but I want to stop and visit a minute. It is that idea of worshiping the beast and the Antichrist, or we will also see him listed as a false prophet, a title I particularly like, false prophet. But let's take a look at the listings of these references, okay? Here's all of this, all of these scriptures that you see right here, is when it's talking about worshiping the dragon or the beast or the Antichrist or the image of the beast or something along those lines. It's worship that is not where they're worshiping the true God. It's where they're worshiping the substitute, right? So 10 times it is mentioned that the beast or his image or his giver of power, the dragon, is worshipped. And we could go off on that 10, the number 10, but I'm not going to do that. But let's just look at that. In Revelation 13:4, it says, and they worship the dragon. And it also says, and they worship the beast. In 13:8, it says, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. In 13:12, it says, them that dwell therein to worship the first beast. And then 13:15, it says, they worship the image of the beast. In 14:9, it says, if any man worship the beast in his image. In 14:11, it says, they worship the beast in his image. In 16:2, it says, and upon them who worshipped his image. In 19:20, it says, and them that worshipped his image. In 24, it says, those that had not worshipped the beast. So all of that is talking about worship of the beast. And again, that worship is supposed to be set aside for God. It is worship of God. Now, this alone, and you say, why are you harping on this? Because it's talking about worship. It's obviously related to the church somehow. It's obviously related to something spiritual. It's obviously related to God somehow, or some imposter that takes the place of God. And when we look at, I've never heard anybody worshiping the government of America, or worshiping the government of Israel, or worshiping the government. We've always been told, as futurists, we was told that there was a one world government rising up. Well, what is it with all this worship? Who worships the government? Nobody worships the government. A government's not a spiritual thing. A government doesn't receive praise and honor and glory and stuff like that. This is not talking about a government. This is talking about a spiritual thing. Something that takes the place of the true spiritual thing. The Antichrist, the substitute for Christ. Maybe you never looked at that, but I feel feel like we needed to touch on that a little bit. Because like I said, when I was a futurist, I missed all the worship. Man, and once you see all this worship, how can you not realize this has got something to do with something spiritual, man? So, the word worship is the exact same word used when it talks about worshiping God. And just like you're worshiping God, just like that. The word is G4352 in the Strong's, and it's pronounced, let's try this, proskuneo. That's good enough. Proskuneo. Yeah, it sounds good. It comes from 4314, and probably a derivative of G2965, meaning to kiss. Stick with me here. Meaning to kiss like a dog licking his master's hand, to fawn or crouch to kneel down before, right? Literally or figuratively, to prostrate oneself in homage, do reverence, to adore, to worship. And they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's just show you some illustrations from the life of the Pope. Here's some illustrations from the past where people used to have to crouch down and kiss the toe of the Pope. In worship of the Antichrist. The Pope. In honor of the Pope. That last picture, the very last picture you see down there, the one that's actually a picture, not an illustration, is a picture of the toe of the statue of Peter the Apostle, which they claim was the first Pope, even though he was not. I listened to a guy today, and they said that he was crucified in Rome. I don't know. I need to research that and see if Peter was crucified in Rome. I've heard some people say Peter was never in Rome. If he was ever in Rome, he certainly was not treated very honorably. But anyway, that's the Pope's deal. That's how they rose up above all the other bishops. They said Peter was the Pope of Rome. And so where Jesus said, upon this rock I'll build my church, they staked their claim on that. And so the Pope of Rome the Bishop of Rome rose up and said, I'm the guy because I got directly from Jesus through Peter. Yeah, whatever. So, it's a twisting of the scripture on what Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church. They feel that was Peter, not the revelation given to Peter from the Father that Jesus was the Christ. I guess you got to start somewhere. Anyway, over the years, all the toe kissing and the hand rubbing has given Peter a club foot. You see that? See that foot? The thing's made out of brass. Now, how much adoration is this statue getting that it rubbed the toes off of his feet? And this is in St. Peter's Square, St. Peter's Basilia. That word's wrong. Basquilia. You guys know what I'm saying. Anyway, St. Peter's Cathedral in Vatican City. Now, they quit all the toe kissing over the years, but they still want you to lick his hand. Kiss his ring. Okay? Still got to kiss the guy's ring. Matter of fact, I saw a how-to website while preparing this study, and they had how to meet the Pope or something like that. What you got to do to meet the Pope. And I think if I met the Pope, I'd say, hey, dude, nice hat, or something like that. But they told you in this teaching to kiss his ring. Anybody getting this? Worship the hand, to lick the hand, kiss his ring. Anyway, where are we? So we're speaking blasphemies now. It says, and there was given unto him, this is 13:5 and 6, it says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. Now, we need to clean up a few edges. And like I said earlier, I call this the sprinkles. The wounded head was healed, and was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies for 42 months, which is 1,260 days, which the day-to-year principle gives you 1,260 years. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. These verses associate him with the little horn in Daniel 7 and 8, whom everyone agrees is the Antichrist. The wounded head healed in Revelation and the little horn of Daniel 7 are the same person. They are the Pope. They are the Antichrist. Daniel 7:8 says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Okay, let's cover the sprinkles here real quick. It seems like all these verses mention the 10 horns and the speaking of blasphemy. So let's deal with the 10 horns first. The beast that we saw in Revelation 12:13 and Revelation 13:1 had 10 horns. Okay, this is the same beast that we see in Daniel 7:7 and 8, and also Daniel 7:20 and 24. Now, I've told you before that in the dragon, we see the complete life of the Roman Empire. Okay, the 7 heads are 7 mountains, as well as 7 different types of government associated with the 7 crowns. All right, then we got the little horn. It says, and I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, if in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. In Daniel 7:24 it says, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and shall rise after them. And another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. All right. When we get to the dust of the Roman Empire, the West, and we see the fall of the Roman Empire, there were 10, again, I'm talking 476, I'm talking about the Western Roman Empire, I'm not talking about Constantinople later on, but I'm talking about the fall of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire. At the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476, there were 10 kingdoms that rose up and took their places. There was 10 kingdoms that had conquered. You can see those 10 kingdoms on your screen. Those 10 kingdoms were the Anglo-Saxons, the Franks, the Almans, the Burgundians, the Visigoths, the Suevi, the Bavarians, the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths. You see those 3 I've got in red, okay? There's a reason for that, because 3 of these were plucked up by the roots. Okay, it's my understanding, and we talked about it last time when we saw that the dragon spewed forth water. He invaded the land with people. That's what that flood meant. He invaded the land with people. The land opened up its mouth and swallowed the water. And so what that means, the people converted to Christianity. Instead of killing the Christians, they converted. Okay? So everybody converted to Christianity. And that reminds me again, who can make war with the beast? Isn't that something? At that time, who could attack the Pope? If you're a Christian, he's the head of the church. You're not going to attack that. All those nations became Christian nations. He's not going to attack they're not going to attack the Pope. That's pretty clever, isn't it? Anyway, 3 of those nations were Arian in their beliefs. And what the Arians believed was that Jesus Christ was created by God and he was not God. Now, you would think that the book of John would take care of that belief when he said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and nothing was made without him that was made. And I know I butchered that a little bit, but we're familiar with those verses. We know that Jesus Christ was God. He was in the beginning with God, and nothing was made without him. He's the Word of God, and God spoke everything into existence. Let there be light, and there was light. God spoke that. Everything was made through the Word, okay? So, we know that. But the Arians believed that Jesus Christ did not exist until God made him in Mary's womb, okay? So that's what the Arians believed. The 3 that believed that were the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths, okay? And they were shortly plucked out. Now, I don't want to leave this section without covering these 10 horns and the 3 that were plucked out, and I want to add them in our timeline. That's what I was talking about when I said sprinkles. I want to add them into our timeline of Revelation 13 because I think it adds a little bit of something to the teaching, because it's all right there together. Challengers of the historicist view like to point out that it says in these 2 verses that the little horn, the Antichrist, would be the one that subdued or plucked up these 3 kingdoms. Well, that's a pretty good point in a way, because at this time in our transition, the Pope didn't have an army. So you could certainly make that argument. But even though he does not have an army, what he does have is an ear. He's got the ear of the emperor of the Byzantine Empire. Sometimes if you got an ear, you don't have to have an army. So he's got the ear of the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, and he has an army. And he also has power. So if the Pope could get his ear, the Pope has an army, and the Pope has power. Okay? Now, I'm not a historian. I've studied. I'm trying to learn. I don't claim to know everything. I'm learning something every time I turn these rocks over. In these teachings, I learn something new all the time. But I want to read from some people who are historians. Okay? Here's some different historians that, and I meant to find out how to pronounce that guy's name. Niccolo Machiavelli. That sounds pretty good. He was in his book, booklet or whatever, The History of Florence. He said nearly all the wars which the northern barbarians carried on in Italy were occasioned by the pontiffs. The pontiffs, that's the Pope. And so what he's saying is, nearly all the battles that took place around Rome after the fall of the Roman Empire had something to do with the Pope pulling strings. I called him Conniving Ivan, old Conniving Ivan. John Clark Ridpath, in his book, History of the World, he says the Heruli was overthrown by the Ostrogoths on a divine commission from Emperor Zeno, the Eastern Roman Empire. The scheming pontiff, again, that's the Pope, used one to destroy the other. What's he saying? He's saying that the Pope, wanting to get rid of the Heruli, he talked the emperor into telling the Ostrogoths that they would be on a divine commission, divine meaning order of God, by order of God, if they would go and destroy the Heruli. Who told him that? Well, the Pope told him that. John Henry Cardinal Newman, in his essay on the development of Christian doctrine, says the Pope was changing one Arian master for another. He just said, I'll get rid of this guy. They were both Arian. They both believed that Jesus Christ was created, but at least he would be rid of one of them. And then Edward Gibbon, his great book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, he said the Bishop of Rome implored Justinian to uproot the Ostrogoths. So these four historians all confirm that the Pope used the Eastern Roman Empire as a tool to get rid of these three empires that were Arian. Okay, so if anybody says that to you, say, well, it couldn't have been the Pope. Can't be the Pope because he didn't have an army. Well, he knew some guys that had an army, and he had their ear. And this is how it went down. Those three groups of people, they disappeared off the face of the earth. They no longer exist. You're not going to run into anybody, and you say, what's your lineage? What's your ancestry? And you say, well, I'm here a lot. No, you're not. You're not. They're gone. They're wiped off the face of the earth. Well, the ones that wasn't wiped off wound up being into something else, being somebody else, So I want to add them. I want to add these three horns that was plucked up into our timeline. Okay, so the Ostrogoths were commissioned by the Emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire through the influence of the Pope. We just covered it, under divine commission to destroy the Heruli, which they accomplished in 493. So we see that there from 476 after the fall of the Roman Empire to 493 AD, the Heruli were destroyed by the Ostrogoths. Okay, and we're told by historians that after the middle of the 6th century, their name completely disappeared from history. There's no current people that they can trace their lineage back to the Heruli. After the 6th century, they're gone. So basically, within 100 years, they were done. They were gone. The Vandals were stationed in North Africa in Carthage, as we discussed when we learned about the Second Trumpet. Carthage was invaded by the Byzantine army on September 15th, 533, and the next year, all the Vandal-occupied land was restored to the Byzantine Empire. The Vandals soon ceased to exist. It is estimated that there were 5 million people exterminated in Africa during that time. Okay, so that's 533. It's right after the Heruli was destroyed. Then we got 534. Finally, where am I at here? Finally, the Ostrogoths, after defeating the Heruli, were controlling Italy. Rome was besieged for 1 year, and 9 days. Oh, we already covered the Vandals. Okay. Finally, the Ostrogoths, after defeating the Heruli, were controlling Italy. Rome was besieged for 1 year and 9 days in 538. That was the same year that the Pope was put into office by military force, and were finally defeated, and the city was delivered. According to Ridpath, they were totally destroyed in 554, and you may be familiar with this time frame. It's also called the Gothic War. Okay, so in 554 AD, the Ostrogoths were destroyed by the Byzantine army. There you have your three. You have your three horns that was plucked up. Thank you, Pope. So anyway, when the dust settled, the Arians were no longer a problem. As with most things, you could do an entire study on this, but again, I just wanted to get it in there so that you could be aware of the three horns that were plucked out, because this all fits together. It just so fits together so nice, and just when you got the puzzle pieces right, it just paints such a beautiful picture, doesn't it? So understanding. Just say, God is amazing. So we went back to tidy that up a bit. Now what? The other thing these verses kept talking about was a big fat mouth, a big fat blasphemous mouth. In Daniel 7:8, we're told he will have a mouth speaking great things. In Daniel 7:20, he says it have a mouth that would speak very great things. In Revelation 13:5, it says a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. In Revelation 13:6, the verse reads, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle. What's his tabernacle? The people of God. And them that dwell in heaven. And you can find a few examples of that throughout history. Now, every time that I get to the verses about the great big blasphemous mouth, I fall into a great slog. There are just so many ways to go, so many ways to take it. Unfortunately, what I always want to find is correspondence in the Pope's own words, something that puts a shiver down your spine that can leave no doubt, like the painting of Pope Benedict XVI by Igor Babalov that hangs in the Vatican Museum in Rome. I took a little searching, but I finally found a picture of it that I was not afraid to share, since it had a Facebook share button on it. I'm assuming it seemed pretty safe. Just to make sure, I've posted the address of the post to the slide. It was a fellow named Taylor Marshall. Okay, now the deal with that is that painting of that dude in the funny hat. He's got funnier hats. I don't know why he wore that one, but anyway. That is the official portrait of Pope Benedict XVI by Igor V. Babalov. There you can see where I got it at taylormarshall.com. And that painting is called The Truth, the Way, and the Life. So it's called The Truth, the Way, and the Life. Now, Mr. Marshall said that if he was going to do that painting, he would have opted to leave the statue of Christ out altogether and just have the Pope on a dark background alone. I don't know. I would say if you're going to call this painting The Truth, the Way, and the Life, you need to get the dude in the fancy duds out of the way and zoom in a little closer on my Savior, Jesus Christ. But that's just me. Anyway, so I want to find things like that. That just blows me away that someone would allow them to do a painting of them and say, yeah, call it the way, the truth, the way, and the life. So if someone was going to do a portrait of you and was going to call it, let's say they was going to call it the Lamb of God, wouldn't you object? Or what about the Alpha and Omega? We're going to do this painting of you and we're going to call it the Alpha and Omega. What about we'll call it the Good Shepherd? No, you're not doing that. I think it's sort of blasphemous, isn't it? But I guess old Benny said, just flip the words around a little. Don't call it the way, the truth, and the life. Mix them up a little. Nobody ever noticed. Right? That's right. But you can find other things, like Pope Leo XIII saying, but since we hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty, he said that, we, and by we, he was talking of himself and the ruling college of bishops, I'm assuming, held upon this earth the place of God Almighty. I found a letter written by Pope Gregory VII to Bishop Herman of Metz, which contained a good bit of blasphemy against everyone on the planet. Of course, the entire thing was based on Jesus giving all the authority of the church to Peter and Peter becoming the first pope. which is a big malarkey sandwich, 2 lies with bologna in the middle. But he said some nice things in it. Let's see. He said that of the Pope alone, all princes shall kiss the feet. It may be permitted to him to depose emperors, that no chapter and no book shall be considered canonical without his authority, that he himself may be judged by no one, that the Roman Church has never erred, nor will it err to all eternity, the Scriptures bearing witness. Well, those are some pretty neat things. I wish I could claim some of that stuff, but I think I'm smarter than that. So those are some pretty good. And what I did, I read his letter, and I found some things in there that I thought, it's kind of a big, broad, blasphemous phrase, and so I threw that in there. Pope Innocent III, in his inaugural speech, he said, the successor of St. Peter stands midway between God and man, below God, above man, judge of all, judged of none. That's pretty good. So there's that. That goes along with one of the Pope's titles, which is Supreme Pontiff, which means Great High Priest, which puts him, equal to Jesus. Jesus is the Great High Priest, but Supreme Pontiff, that title means Great High Priest. Holy Father, I think there's just one Holy Father, but he claims he's the guy. The Vicar of Christ, which is the substitute of Christ, which also means Antichrist. That's literally what that means. Vicar of Christ literally means Antichrist, substitute of Christ. So, in place of Christ. Well, that's enough of that. Now, if you really want to get over in the weeds, do some research on things that have been said about the office of the Pope by others. And that really opens up the doors. But like I said, I wanted to see things that was said by the popes themselves. So there's just a few examples. Anyway, I think that brings us to verse 7. Actually, it doesn't. Hold on just a second. One more thing. I want to add one more thing about the little horn that is interesting. And, God knows the end from the beginning. And not only does he know the end from the beginning, he also knows the middle. Once we get into the vials, we'll be talking about the Papal States, which was all lost and wound up belonging to the nation of Italy. However, in 1929, there was a treaty signed called the Lateran Treaty between the nation of Italy and the Holy See. And the Holy See, that's the supreme body of government of the Catholic Church. The treaty made Vatican City a sovereign, independent nation ruled over by the Pope. This officially made Vatican City the world's smallest country. If you look it up, just do a Google search, look up the world's smallest country. Vatican City is the world's smallest country. Okay? Now, horns, whenever we see these beasts and we see horns, horns represent kings on these beasts. And I would guess the littlest country needs the littlest horn, wouldn't you? Vatican City, ruled over by the little horn Pope, King Pope. It's roughly 109 acres. The second smallest country is Monaco, and it's 4 times the size of Vatican City. Population, Vatican City, population 526. Salute. It reminds me of hee-haw. How the mighty have fallen. Anyway, on to verse 7. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. We were told in Daniel 7:21 that the little horn made war with the saints and prevailed against him. This was known as the Inquisitions of the Middle Ages. Depending on who you ask, the numbers range from a few 100,000 killed to 68 million. I actually saw something the other day that said that they believed over 100 million was killed. But I don't know. It depends on who you believe. If you believe the official Catholic report, a few people got slapped on the wrist and told, now don't you believe that no more. But I don't think it's right. So we've talked about the Inquisition in previous lessons. Here's a short listing from Robert Carangola's book, The Present Reign of Jesus Christ, of some of the victims. This is in no way, shape, or form a complete list. This is just some that Robert Carangola called out. That's his book. I highly recommend that book. I used that book as a study guide. I didn't just read that book. And as I always mean to say, I think I do say it often, I don't expect you to take my word for any of this stuff. I would love it if you, and some of my viewers do. I've had some of my viewers say, I'm buying that book and I'm reading that book. Had one lady, she bought the Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. And that's just incredible, but man, I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want you to get in there and I want you to study. And I want you to, because I guarantee you, if you get to studying this stuff, you're going to find things that confirm this that I probably don't even know. Okay? I'm just sharing what I know. But here's the things that Carangola called out. In 1237, there was, how did I do that? Between 1237 and 1342, tens of thousands of Vaudois was massacred in northern Italy. Between 1300 and 1413, there was the persecution of the Lollards. In 1421, thousands of Protestant Hussites were killed. In 1481 to 1808, there was 31,912 Protestants burned alive during the Spanish Inquisition and 300,000 tortured. In 1488, there was 3,000 Vandos burned and suffocated to death in a cave in Piedmont. I've read about that. In 1546, there was 50,000 Fleming Protestants hanged, burned, or buried alive. In 1555, there was 300 burned alive. In 1567, there was 36,000 executed in the Netherlands. In 1572, there were 60,000 butchered in one day in the massacre of St. Bartholomew's. In 1631, there was over 20,000 massacred at Magdeburg, Germany. Now, with numbers like that, over several hundred years, I don't think it's hard to rack up big numbers. Of course, the definitive book on the subject would be Fox's Book of Martyrs, if you can get an older copy. It appears at that time that there was 5 volumes to that work, and now it's hardly more than a pamphlet after all the edits. Carangola mentions the approaching end of the age by Henry Gatton Guinness as well. I've not read that book, but my wife has read several of Henry Gatton Guinness's books, and she's a very big fan. So, now just to be clear, the war began before the actual Inquisition. E.B. Elliott in Horae Apocalypticae talks about the pre-Reformation witnesses and what they dealt with in Volume 2 of his work. So there was plenty of people killed for a long, long time. All right. So Revelation 13:8, it says, "And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." And there was a time that in Europe, if you were going to be a Christian, you were going to be Catholic. And you were going to be subject to the Pope. So that's all there was as far as they knew. In Revelation 13:9, it says, "If any man have an ear, let him hear." Revelation 13:10 says, "He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints." Judgment day is coming. And be patient, my brethren. Payday's coming. Now that brings us to the end of this lesson. We will hopefully finish chapter 13 next time, and then on to the vials of Revelation. And in case you're wondering, so, well, this guy was supposed to be talking about the rapture. What's this all about? Because I get that sometimes. You didn't say nothing about the rapture. When I had the futurist view, and people who had the futurist view, when they taught me the futurist view, they said the book of Revelation was all about the 7-year tribulation period, and it is not. And they said that the 70 weeks of Daniel, that 70th week was the tribulation period. It is not. They used Matthew 24 and said that Matthew 24 was talking about the last days. And for the most part of Matthew 24, it does not. Matthew 24 dealt with the judgment that was upon Jerusalem when the Romans came in and totally destroyed that city and totally destroyed the sanctuary. And if you've not watched parts 1, 2, and 3 of this, but you'd like to know more about the destruction of Jerusalem, I highly recommend those teachings. So thank you again for joining me. I hope you got something out of this, and look forward to seeing you again. Hopefully it will not be as long this time, and because like I said, I'm already got some of it done. So I have tried to make these a little shorter for everyone involved, the listener and the presenter, and we did one that it took what was it, 2 days to download or something crazy. So we made them a little shorter. May the Lord bless thee and keep thee. May the Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. I bless thee in Jesus' name. If you're ever around 8036 Lynn Avenue in Hamlin, West Virginia on Sunday morning around 10 a.m., stop by and see us. Or you can send me an email at doyouknowjesusisforyou@gmail.com. Until we see each other again, may God richly bless you. Thank you so much for stopping by.